Mike Malatesta, welcome to Succession Stories. I'm so excited to be with you today.
And I am as well, Laurie. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for doing this podcast too. I've been listening to some episodes, and you're a pro. I really like it.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me also because you have podcasts and that's how we met on your show, How Did It Happen? And I thought we had a great conversation. And it was lovely to be a guest on your show. And I said to you, hey, how would you feel if we flipped the mic around and you jumped at the invitation? And I'm so grateful because I think people are going to benefit from hearing your story as an entrepreneur and some of the challenges you faced along the way, and of course, how you're helping people today. So why
Sure.
don't we start there? Why don't you tell us a bit about you and your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, sure. So I co-founded my first company in 1992, which makes me seem ancient probably, but I was a very young man at the time, 26, and it was in the waste industry. And I had come to that industry sort of very accidentally through a love of trucks. When I was a kid, I loved trucks. My dad was a truck driver. We lived across the street from a trucking company, and I was just all caught up in everything truck. And when I started working with trucks when I was a teenager, and then when I was in college, I wanted to drive a bigger truck. So I started knocking on doors at waste companies because I thought trash trucks were really cool. And one of them hired me. Uh, it was uh, well, I couldn't believe that they hired me because I was only like 20 years old, and everyone else was saying they couldn't insure me and that kind of thing. And I was like, okay. And I thought I would never get it. But anyway, I got this job, so this summer job, and I thought it was great. I just thought it was amazing. The work that the company was doing, cleaning up stuff, recycling stuff, um, just being very helpful in building projects and all that. I just and the trucks and the equipment, and I just thought it was great. So um, that led me to talk to the owner about career in this, and Bill told me that I should go work for or try to get a job with one of the big companies because they were a family-owned business, so that's what I did. I did exactly what he told me to do, and I ended up with a big company, and I was with them for 5 years, and I learned a lot of different parts of the waste business. And then when I had the opportunity to go out on my own, rounded up the money and sort of cashed in everything we had, rounded up some investor money, and just bought a truck and just started. And from there, the short story, Laurie, is that we had a 22-year run in that first business, and it grew, very nicely, very consistently, with a lot of challenges and a lot of great things that happened along the way. Um, and then in 2015, I had an opportunity to sell that business and did to a much larger strategic acquirer. Um, but I wasn't done yet. And I'm still not done, but a couple years later, 3 years later, I was able to partner with a private equity firm, become an operating partner in their fund, and start a similar type waste business to what I had owned before. We 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 had grown our initial business organically and through acquisition, so I was very familiar with the growth triggers in both sides of both triggers in that business. So we put a platform together, buying a few companies, and started to branded it, started to improve it, run it better, and we ended up being able to sell that business in 2021 for so that wasn't a good outcome and another great experience for me and for the private equity firm and for the people that I had the chance to work with as well.
Fantastic. So of course, there's lots of things to ask you about in this story here. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna rewind and take us back. So let's go back to the first business. And what was the name of that company?
Advanced Waste Services.
Okay, so Advanced Waste Services. How did you get people to invest in you? What was it that you said, hey, this business is going to be a winner. I'm the guy to take it forward. Were these friends and family? Was it commercial bank loans? How did you put the plan together and get people excited about it?
Hey, yeah, good question. So this is exactly how it happened. I had worked with a fellow who became my partner. His name was Butch Weiss, and Butch and I both put in everything that we had, which was approximately $100,000. And then, so that's cashing out 401k, cashing out my wife's 401k. Butch had a CD that he cashed out. I borrowed from my parents, and I also borrowed from my wife's parents. And we went to the bank with that, and we were able to get an SBA-backed loan. But near the very end of that process, they told us that they would need an additional $25,000 of equity in order to do the loan, which we did not have. And so I went searching for, I had a very limited network because I had moved around a lot with the company I was with. So I was in Milwaukee, which is where I am now. I had a limited network of people that I knew, but I knew one person who I thought might have the money and might have an interest or know us enough to have an interest. So I went to Chuck and I asked him, and short story was he didn't want to do the whole 25, but he would do half if his friend would do half. And so I was like, well, of course, that's fine. And so I ended up with three partners at the beginning, Butch, and then Chuck and his friend Larry. So that's how we put the company together at the beginning.
And so were all three of those partners involved in the business, or just Butch was?
Just Butch. Yeah. So Larry and Chuck had their own businesses and were doing their own thing. So they were, great partners, really good mentors, but day to day was just Butch and I.
Gotcha. And so take us through kind of the growth story. We started from literally zero, your basis
Yeah.
of zero,
Zero.
and grew the business and had a successful exit. At what point over that 22-year period did you say to yourself and you and Butch and the other partners that you were thinking about an exit or thinking about a sale? And how did you get ready for that process?
Well, I think that the real trigger, Laurie, was in 2003, October of 2003. So about 11 years into this business, my partner Butch passed away. He was injured in a fire at one of our facilities, and he passed away a few days later. And that was a real challenge for me and for the other partners, but for me specifically because we worked together, we complemented each other. He was just like a fatherish figure to me. He was also my biggest supporter, and so when that happened, there was I was asking myself a lot of questions, not just necessarily about exiting, but whether I still wanted to keep doing this because I felt responsible for what had happened, and I just didn't know that I could navigate. I could continue to navigate and and lead the business, without him. But ultimately, I call that sort of my anti-fragile test. Of eventually, like most people can get past things eventually, and I was able to get past that. And then fast forward. So at that time, I knew that this thing could implode at any second, which I had never really thought about before. I just thought it would always be here. Whether it was always great or not, I didn't know, but it was always be here. And that made me think that maybe it wouldn't always be here. Things can happen. And that led us on a journey towards really figuring out the value drivers in this business and how we can maximize those, because you never know. Fast forward to 2009, so 6 years later, I think this was the thing that really got us thinking about exit. We went through a recapitalization process with investment bank because for a lot of reasons that aren't important to this discussion, but what is important to this discussion is going through that process really opened our eyes and my eyes in particular to all the things that a buyer is looking at when they are evaluating whether they want to acquire a company and at what price they want to acquire the company. So that process, we didn't end up going through it, but the education we got going through that process was invaluable. And then after that, we just started being like, okay, buyer's lens on this business. We still got to focus on our growth. We still got to focus on the things that matter, of course, but we also have to think about what's this going to be like after we're done with it. And so we started to professionalize our financials, for example. We started to really look at branding and trademarking and IP and the story about our business that made it different than other people's or other competitor, other like businesses. Management, really focusing on me not being the tallest building in the business, for example, or the dancing bear, the one who always sort of has to be front and center for the business to continue to operate. And so we built a management structure that was much different. And I continued to educate myself through groups that I would belong to, mentors that I would engage with about what is the real role of the entrepreneur, the founder, the CEO in a business. And I came to the conclusion that my real role is not to be needed, first and foremost, certainly not to be needed on a day-to-day business, to be very structured and focused on the things that I do or can do that really drive value and importance in the business, and try not to do anything else. And really, my job is to maximize value. That's my job. Whether you're going to sell the business or not, my job is to maximize value. So that progression of things, I think, started with Butch and then sort of accelerated through 2009. And by the time, we had an opportunity to sell the business, we were, I would say, very prepared, way more prepared than most, but still not as prepared as I would be if I were, doing it all over again.
Yeah, you have the benefit of hindsight, and I am so sorry to hear about Butch's tragic passing. I very much appreciate that you are bringing this up as part of the story, because many of our listeners are in partnerships in their business.
Yeah.
And when on this show and in webinars and other things where I've talked about contingency planning and that we try to control as many things as we can, but ultimately there are things that are out of our control, such as what happened with your partner.
Yeah.
What happened in that circumstance? Did you end up buying the shares from his family, his heirs?
Yeah. Good point. So we had some smart planning from the beginning. So we had a buy sell in place from the very beginning, because we had a 4-partner group, and we had a formula that we established for that buy sell, and we had insurance, key man insurance on every person in the business to fund that in the event that we needed it, and that's how we ended up doing it. And it's a funny thing because even now today, when I talk to people, that they just, well, like you said, that you never think anything's going to happen and whatever, but even the simplest things that are just kind of malpractice not to have, like a mechanism to buy out your partner's estate if something horrible would happen to that person, or a formula established to value it, and then a funding mechanism like insurance to have it. So I find that there's still so many people out there just don't do that, haven't connected that dot. don't want to spend the money on the insurance. Well, no, and nobody wants to spend the money on insurance, right? Because you think you'll never need it. But man, oh man, I mean, uh, to go through a horrible thing like we went through with Butch and not have had, just think of what it would be like if we didn't have all that in place. It would have been just much more challenging. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And you're dealing with grief, and then you have to continue to run the business. We
right.
could do a whole episode just on how your business recovered from such a shocking event. So we're in the space of 2009 when you started to work with the iBank. And
Yeah.
did the same investment bank represent your company for sale to strategics
In 2015.
in 2015? So
No.
the process, what was the process to bring it to market?
Yeah. So here was the process. Like I said, we had done, a lot of work from 2009 up through, and by the way, in 2013, I was able to buy out my other two partners. So, which had been a goal of mine for a long time. And so I was effectively the 100% owner of the business by the time 2015 rolled around. And I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I thought I knew everything I needed to know, Laurie, and so I handled it myself. So I did have the benefit of the right advisory team that I had already built because we'd been doing acquisitions for a long time. So I knew that we had the right team in place. So I did get a lot of support from the team, but in terms of negotiating non-legal terms, just financial terms with the buyer and employment with the buyer and those types of things, I did that on my own, and I would not recommend that to anybody because I will tell you that by the time that this happened, as I mentioned, we had already gone through a process in 2009. I'd been a private equity investor since 2010 or 12. I had a lot of deal experience. I'd purchased, I don't know, maybe like 18 companies at that time. So I had a lot of experience. But I still would have definitely benefited from someone who sole interest in the sale process was me.
Did you
And
take things personally? Did it make you emotionally, did it give you anxiety to be kind of on the front line of those negotiations? What do you think would be different of how you felt about it or approached it if you were using a third party like myself as a mergers and acquisitions advisor? And
yeah,
of
I'd
course,
say
this
the
is in the
biggest
rearview
thing,
mirror. We don't know exactly, but how do you think about it?
yeah. So certainly there were times during it, and anyone, your audience is sophisticated. But anyone who has not been through a due diligence process for the sale of a business, any business of any size, you're really in for a ride. The expectations, the amount of information, the questions, the document requests, everything is coming at you, and you're trying to run your business too, right? And you're trying to keep it a secret, and you're trying to do all this stuff, and emotionally it can be very difficult. So you asked me about anxiety. Sure, I felt anxiety from time to time. But I think the thing that that was a mistake for me during this process was that the 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 I think I talked too much to too many different people from the company that was looking to acquire us, instead of having someone to help me understand when and what I should and should not offer. And I'm not trying to suggest you hide something from someone, but you and I start talking, right? And then we're just like, oh, now we're friends, right? And so and there is kind of that, but there's also like, I want the best that if you're buying me, you want the best deal for you, right? And I want the best deal for me. we can get to a win-win, but it's not always going to be the same, you know? So, so I think I left about $4 million on the table as the bottom line, which was, you know, like,
Why do you say that? how'd you come up with that number?
because they reduced the price by $4 million. They repriced it kind of near the end. And there was in my opinion, the reason for it was I offered some information about my particular financial situation with my partners. And that was, and I was just doing that just to be transparent, like this is how it's going to go. And, you know, I just thought I was having, you know, a conversation with somebody about something, and turned out this is, I don't know, I was not in the meetings or anything, but I feel like they saw that as an opportunity to reduce the price. And I felt like I had made a mistake there as a result. And I also felt like I was too far in to reverse course. And I think if I had someone working with me, I would not have done that. And if they had come back and with a price reduction request, I would have had a better response to it, and I probably would have had more courage and confidence to stand my ground.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, I guess in the technical terms, we call that a retrade.
Yeah.
So they were, you said, about 2 weeks out from the close date?
Well, I didn't say that, but it was within a month
Within
for
a month.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a relatively short time horizon. They learned something in the diligence process they hadn't asked about, but you had offered, and then they saw some advantage in the situation because, as you were saying, you know, they interpreted what you had shared with them as a reason for a discount.
Or as
And
an opportunity for,
an
yeah,
opportunity for a discount. And they bet correctly that you wouldn't say no. So I can understand why, in the big picture, if you were going to redo part of that negotiation, it's a very, very important learning for the audience. I really appreciate you sharing it, because I'm sure,
sure.
you know, sometimes in life we regret what we do and we regret things we don't do. And it's hard to know. It's hard to know exactly, you know, how to handle things. And you did the best you could in that situation. You had a successful exit. Did you stay on, in the sense of, you know, it was, I know from your bio, it sold for, I don't know what number you were able to share, but eight-figure exit is what I read.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so,
Which was probably a good exit for you and for your family. And of course, there might have been more on the table there, as you explained. But how did you feel about the exit generally?
I felt, besides that mistake, I felt, and I actually, I want to be clear. I don't think that they just played the game. I mean, I gave them an opening to play the game. They played the game. That's how this works. And that's why it's so important to have someone playing the game for you or with you, and not trying to play the game yourself. As I mentioned, I was pretty sophisticated at that time. Many people, I'm sure, that are listening haven't been through the same experiences that I had been through, and would be and are even more lost and intimidated and unsure and whatever, as they try to go through and manage this type of process on their own. But so you can always say no, of course, right? I had the option to say no. I could have said no, I don't want to do that. I said yes. And as soon as I was going through the process of evaluating what to do there, I just said to myself, if I say yes to this, that's my decision. It's not anything that they've done. And my job, as I stay on with them, is to help them achieve their goals, and not have any regrets about what I've done. And I do not have any regrets about it, except I don't consider that a regret. I call it a mistake. I made a mistake, and now I'm helping people not make that same kind of mistake. But one of the things I do want to leave your listeners with is there are too many, in my experience, there are too many business owners who sell their business and do have regret. Like 4 out of 5 have some type of regret. And that is not where you want to be when you make this most significant transition and life affecting transition. You do not want to be there. And, you are helping people, as am I, trying to not, to not have a transition that has anything close to regrets attached to it. And there's a mindset that goes into that, of course, and there's a lot of planning that goes into that. And a lot of times people just need to be told, not told, but guided through the process where, let's set the expectation up right up front. Let's not set it up later as you go down the road and you're into this negotiation with people. Let's set it up and let's make sure we get to that expectation. And if you get to that expectation, boy, it's going to be hard for you to tell me that you have regret about it, because you adopted the mindset, you set the goal, you had the expectation, and that's when you get that, it should be a dream, not a regret.
I love that philosophy. I think that's really important. How can owners build with an exit in mind? And it's one of the reasons I know for you why you're pursuing this passion of helping entrepreneurs on this phase of their journey.
Right.
If we kind of shift into, what you're doing today with the podcast, your book, and other resources that you've put into the world in a very meaningful way for entrepreneurs to benefit. Tell me about the dream exit process and how that's helping founders and owners.
Okay, sure. Yeah, thanks for asking. So, I started doing some coaching after I wrote my book, which is called Ownership, How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. You can get it anywhere books are sold, except in a bookstore, probably. You can't get it there. But people reached out to me after I wrote that book, asking me if I could help them. And I had never been a coach or thought about coaching. I had coached a lot of people, but I had never been put my hand up as a coach. And so I started doing that with a few people, and I was really thinking about, okay, there's a lot of people out there that are coaching business owners and entrepreneurs, and a lot of great people who can, help them maximize this or, leverage this or add this. There's all kinds of expertise out there. And I was trying to figure out, well, where's my real expertise? And I saw a quote by Charlie Munger, and it said something like the most impactful thing that you can do is teach somebody something new. And when I read that, I thought, okay, so when I try to apply that to what I'm trying to help people with now, where does my experience and skill set really line up in a way that a lot of other coaches might not have, that can make a really significant positive impact on the people that I work with? And I looked at by this time I've got experience with 25 acquisitions. I've sold 2 businesses through 2 different processes with 2 different structures. I've been an investor, board member. I've got a lot of exposure to this, and I've been the entrepreneur. I've been the founder. I've been the CEO, and I determined that the best way I could help people was by being that person who can get in their shoes, understand their language, understand their thought process, and get them focused on setting up themselves and their business for maximum value and maximum meaning down the road. And that's where the whole dream exit thing came from. It's like, where can I have the most positive impact on people?
Do you think that people struggle to articulate what they want out of an exit?
Yeah, I think they
Why is that?
because no one ever asks them what they want. Like I don't know what your experience is, Laurie, but mine is when you're the business owner, the entrepreneur, the leader, everybody sort of figures you know what you want, and they don't ask you what you want. And not only do they not ask you what you want, they don't hold you accountable to you achieving anything you want. So it's kind of like that thing where we like to hold everybody else accountable. Like, we're going to hold you accountable, but we don't want to be held accountable ourselves. And so, for me, I think that, and you, of course, as well. I mean, we walk the walk, we talk the talk. We can have these kinds of conversations with business owners to get them focused on what they actually want. I mean, it's just an amazing question, right? What do you want? No one shouldn't, there isn't anyone out there that shouldn't be able to answer that question. And that can evolve, of course, but there's no one out there that shouldn't be able to answer that question. But boy, oh boy, when you know what you want and you define it, it's a lot easier to walk back and get everything in place to achieve what you want than it is for you to, get started on something, not knowing what you want, because the likelihood you're ever going to get set up to get it is too fuzzy, right? You don't have a target, you don't know. So you're just kind of moving and not moving intentionally.
Yeah, I find that a lot with people that I work with and talk to. They don't know what their business is worth today. They don't have a sense of what it could be worth if they
Right.
made some improvements or changes. And they're just going through the motions. Everybody's so busy and they're working on what's right in front of them as opposed to looking ahead a bit and thinking ahead. Some investment of time to work on the business and not just in the business is super important. The folks that you've worked with, Mike, in your experience, how do we get them to cross that threshold from I'll kick the can to, yeah, I'm going to take this next step?
It's hard. It takes a forward-thinking person. So either they're naturally forward-thinking, in which case they're very open to doing this, or something happens, a Butch type thing happens in their world, and they're like, "Holy crap!" They're scared, So they get scared, they act, or they, they're like I say, forward thinking and they act. But most, I would say, they just would rather not do something hard like this. They would rather just hope that it will happen at some point. And they always think about, it seems to me the thing that they miss the most is that they think someone's going to come along with a check. They're going to give them that check. Everything's going to be glorious after that, because why wouldn't it be, right? Because, you got a check. And that totally misses the whole picture, because one, as we mentioned earlier, your job is really to create value in the business. So is the check a good check, or is it just a check that's bigger than you've seen before? Those are two different things. And then the whole thing, well, I've got money, so everything's going to take care of itself. Well, that's often a baseball bat type to the head type thing after you get in that situation. And then it's not this glorious, everything's solved in my life thing. And then you start thinking about, oh, okay, well, what should I be doing now, right? It's a terrible time to start thinking about what you should be doing, right?
Can't do exit planning when you're exiting. It's just too late.
Yeah, it's
You've
too
got to
late.
give yourself the time and space. And as we wind down our conversation, Mike,
Yeah.
you've shared so much. I want to ask you to put it all together for us. If there's a top 2 list or a top 3 list of things that you want to suggest people start doing in the next 90 days or 60, whatever it is, 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
What are those things that they should really consider doing to look ahead and start working on an exit for their benefit.
Yeah. So here's something you can do just completely on your own. Like just after you listen to this podcast or other, you can just sit down and just spend 10 minutes thinking about this. And I call it ABZ, right? So A is, where are you right now? I call it the reality check. Where are you right now? Where are you, with your happiness with your business, with your happiness with yourself, with whatever, however you want to think about that. Z is, what do you want? Right. So that's the question we were talking about earlier. What do you want? And then B is, what's the first thing you have to do in order to start making your way towards that? And I think that if people were honest with themselves and just took even a few minutes to write down what they think about that, it would be exceptionally helpful for them to identify the gap between A and Z, and not just the gap between A and Z, but also identify this first step that they could take today to start moving towards that Z and get off of and away from the A.
It's taking small steps. It's figuring out where you want to end up and working backwards, which is really, really smart to do. So thanks for sharing that. Mike, if people want to get in touch with you, what's a good way for them to do that?
Yeah, it's super easy. So dreamexit.com. And you get to me from there. Mike@dreamexit.com is my email. You feel free to email me. I'm happy to talk to anyone about where you are, what you're thinking about, because I learn from everybody I talk to. It's not a one-way street, with me. And if I can help you, great. If Laurie is the right person to help you, that's even better. I have a tremendous respect for her and her book, the Business Transition Handbook. What a gift that you have that available for free for people to download from your website. That's very well done.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you, Mike. I think the audience will learn a lot from the show, and I do encourage folks to follow up with you if they're interested. And in case people are wondering, like, wow, Laurie has someone coming on the show who kind of does what she does, the answer is absolutely. There's a lot of people out there who need the resources of what we are all providing. And I think it's a great venue to have a podcast like this where people can learn and click with those who can help them. And look, there's a lot of resources in the world, right? I'm not going to be a fit for everyone. And that's the number one thing is if people want to learn more and follow up with you, absolutely I encourage them to do that. Thank you so much for coming on Succession Stories and sharing your succession story with me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy you. Thank you.
Thank you.